Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Institute for Personal Development, where total consciousness is the new frontier. Kriya Yoga is the union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices that initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Well, good morning, Swami. Thanks for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well today. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic on this wonderful moon day. And I want to thank you listeners for tuning in. Today on the Voice of Yoga, we'll be talking about the full moon on November 25th of this year, and then the holiday of Thanksgiving on November 26th. We will talk about using these transits to help you create exceptional events in your life. The full moon delivers what began on November 11th of this year. We will talk about using your Kriya Yoga practice to sustain forward motion for your personal intentions. Swami will explain the delicate balance of asking for what you want and not needing to get what you want. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and help bring peace to the earth. Well, something I think the first thing I wanted to talk about was that word of thanksgiving. I think it's interesting that we celebrate this holiday once a year where we give thanks, but then we also are giving. So it almost is kind of like we have to have this attitude of gratitude, but we save it just for one day, and we don't do it every day of the year.
Well, I think at least if you did it one day a year, it's better than not doing it at all. Yeah, I don't know what you mean by that, or I mean, are you saying that we should be grateful all the time? Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think that's what we do with our Kriya Yoga practice. But having holidays and marking days with these types of intention, I also think are important. And, collectively. One of the things, though, that I think we should be a little bit more mindful of is how we are much more secular in our approach to these holidays, that holidays should have deeper spiritual meanings. And, we get a little bit wrapped up in the whole concept of the food, the tangible part of the whole thing, and we lose the deeper meaning of thanksgiving and gratitude for things that are actually more important to us than food.
I think that's exactly the point I was trying to get across, is that we should be grateful for everything that happens in our life. Grateful that, we woke up today and we were able to experience the day and, do the best that we can to try to make change in the world. And like you said, that these are the things that the Kriya Yoga practice does for us once we're engaged in it.
Yeah, exactly. And trying to put your priorities first, trying to establish your values so that you understand that there are more subtle sources of sustenance, resources that we should be more attuned to, I think. And again, that's the physics of spirituality, that like attracts like. So it's not really until we literally rebirth our bodies in this more subtle source of sustenance do we begin to resonate to it. Otherwise, food is much bigger in your life than prana or air, for that matter.
Right. When you were saying that, it's good that we celebrate at least one day a year, and then you've got the whole collective that's celebrating. the Thanksgiving. And I just wonder, we have so many people in this country that are celebrating Thanksgiving, and they're getting together with family, and they're doing whatever. And of course, it is centered around the food, but there is that coming together, I think. And then I wonder if the universe just kind of like really celebrates it. The universe just feels that energy that's happening collectively in this country, and just rejoices when everybody is coming together.
Well, I think if you really unbox that and you start to look at it, I mean, a lot of the drama that takes place during these holidays is a real reflection of how we are so far off point that the holidays become another control drama. And so we find ourselves competing for energy on these limited levels and caught up in just the whole regressive cycle, trying to use a source of sustenance to do something that it's incapable of doing. And I think that's an important thing to observe, is that this full moon, that the sun and the moon are actually in opposition, but they're squaring Neptune. And Neptune is that innate drive in all of us that we want to be whole, we want to be complete people. And one of the things that Institute for Personal Development was founded on was the simple fact that we knew that there was this innate drive in all of us that we want to be whole, we want to be complete, but we also knew that completion couldn't happen in the physical world, that in order for us to actualize this experience of wholeness, that the individual had to learn how to transform. And what that literally means, go through form. We had to separate from our attachment to the realms of particles, to duality. And we had to attach ourselves to something that was more productive, something that would produce this progressive cycle. And so with this full moon squaring Neptune, that could bring that type of insight to a more collective level. Hopefully people will start to see that a lot of our problems are really originating from the simple fact that we are competing for energy on a limited level. That we are trying to do something with a source of sustenance that it's not even capable of being done. And so, as a result, our inner environments are relatively confused and frustrated and can't quite figure out where this guilt, shame, anger, resentment, blame, emptiness, and boredom is all coming from. And so the tendency now is, of course, just to blame. Blame mom and dad, blame your early social, cultural conditioning, blame the government. But the bottom line is that these symptoms are a direct result of our neglect for our attention to this innate drive that we want to be a whole person. And the other thing is that without leadership, without being taught how to do this from somebody who can do it, this whole thing of separating from one source of sustenance and reconnecting to another, there's just so much bad information out there. And so many people are just content with pretending to be doing better than they are. And of course, you approach your life on this very more what I would call superficial level, as opposed to really getting down to the root of the problem and finding solution to what's really going on. And that's where the Kriya Yoga that we teach really comes in. Where an individual can actually connect to the forces that are really important to them. And I'm not just talking about this false sense of gratitude for, what it is that I'm putting in my mouth, but I'm talking about feeling connected to something that's pure, powerful, and sacred.
So then the question comes down to for us is, how do we exercise that discernment? Like you said, that there is bad information out there, and the problem is that people don't understand that it's bad information. So how can they discern if what they're listening to isn't real or isn't true?
Yeah, that the whole thing of doing your own thinking, figuring stuff out, using your mental functions, these are all things that we really try and promote in Kriya Yoga, as opposed to just adopting an opinion, supporting some sort of belief in something. That's why the way we teach yoga, it's way more scientific. It has an evidence procedure. It's, just the simple argument that we always use. When somebody is in crisis, when they're responding as if they're in danger, when they're not in a real life-threatening situation, that we would refer to something like that as you're not thinking right. And, of course, that's just a lot of advice that you give to somebody. But when you are in crisis and you're responding as if you're in danger when you're not in a real life-threatening situation, it doesn't make it easy for you to get out if you don't have the tools that we teach. If you don't change the pattern in your body, if you don't change reward circuits in your brain, neurological pathways, then whether it's imagined or it's real, you're in crisis, and there isn't a whole lot difference between the two. But when you have a metaphysical system that is tried and true, like Kriya Yoga, and you can actually start to use the availability of what you need as a symbol to neutralize unnecessary fears, then, of course, you have a skill that you develop. And again, that's why Kriya Yoga is a path of action, it's a path of knowledge, it's a path of devotion. It's not just a technique. It's not just a coping skill. You're actually trying to initiate a process, this whole thing of apotheosis that we talk about.
Interesting that you were mentioning those words, because I use myself as an example and say that if on my spiritual path, if I had come across somebody and they just appeared to be, charismatic and, seemed like they really talked a good talk, and then if they made the claim that they could do it for me, or just try to get on my vibrational level and I'll carry you through your process, and that to me was a big red flag. So that's how I discerned if somebody ever said, oh, it's very simple, all you have to do is think of me or look at me and therefore I'll kick you up a couple of notches on the consciousness level. So I guess we all have to have this sense of what feels right and what feels wrong. And it really is, it has to come down to us and our sense of awareness and like you said, to initiate our own process.
And then the whole thing of using feeling as your barometer is not necessarily always your best option. Because one of the things we always say that there are clear distinctions between worldly happiness, intellectual happiness, and eternal happiness. And this innate drive that leads to wholeness really is associated with eternal happiness. So there's really only one way that this goes right. And just like you noticed, a lot of times when people promise that they can do this for you, that that in and of itself attaches you to something that's visible and tangible, when in fact you are trying to attach to something that's invisible and intangible. And unless you understand that there is a difference between that, then of course you fall into what the Yoga Sutras call avidya, ignorance, taking the impermanent for the permanent.
All right, great point. I think we're going to just hold our thoughts right there. So, listeners, we're going to hear a word from our sponsor, so we'll be back with you in a few moments. And when I come back, I'll open up the phone lines for any questions that you may have for Swami. So we'll see you in a few minutes.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate.
If you are looking for a samadhi-based experience, IPD Kriya Yoga has the goods. A complete yoga program that includes the practices and the process. Starting with the separation from mother, including the labors and tasks of the hero and the return as a whole person. Practice makes perfect only when practice is whole. Kriya Yoga is a path of action, knowledge, and devotion. Samadhi, or total consciousness, is experienced by knowing and doing with devotion. Call or click now and get started. 603-929-0303 or www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste.
And welcome back. For those of you who are just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So at this time, I'd like to open up the phone lines and see if our callers have any questions for Swami. So if you have a question, you can just shout it out.
Good morning.
Good morning.
What would be some of the characteristics of Neptune that might be relatable in terms of this idea that we can take advantage of the full moon squaring Neptune? Are there characteristics that might be easy to remember throughout the week?
Swami, our caller is asking us for the characteristics of Neptune that might help us move forward.
Yeah, that the whole thing of every psychological urge, every planet has all of these different levels of interpretation. Neptune on the highest octave, of course, is this innate drive that we want to be whole. On probably its lowest point is the whole concept of escape. So when you're using these transits, those are some of the things that you want to really be able to look at, because a lot of times we're trying to use this energy, but in a way that pulls us down instead of lifts us up. So a lot of it has to do with, just like what we were saying earlier, using your mental functions, doing your own thinking, being able to recognize how I am using the energy that's available to me at a given time, so that you don't get stuck in, say, for example, drinking too much during the holidays and not recognizing that is being driven by this innate drive that I want to be whole.
Interesting.
Did that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Well, we had said in our summary for the show that we were going to explain this delicate balance for asking for what we want and not needing to get what you want. So can you shed some insight on that for us?
Yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic that you can get whatever you want as long as you don't want it, kind of a thing. and there's just something about our attachment to results that actually puts a burden on a thought that has been emitted with intention. So being able to be like totally detached from any need for a result will actually help you get better returns. It's very paradoxical. I love the way the Chinese explain it. They say you hang on by letting go. You win by losing.
That's very interesting. So say I want to drive to downtown Portsmouth, and we all know that parking is terrible in downtown Portsmouth. So if I visualize a parking space, but where I want to go, but then I don't want to, if I don't get it, then I have to have this sense of feeling that I'm okay, I'm not in any danger. If I get it, great. If I don't, great. And I realize that's just a really minuscule example. But is that what you're talking about, is getting for what we want, but then it doesn't really matter if you don't get what you want?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I mean, sometimes it seems like we are, I think the term we use is luckier than others. And oftentimes I think the less attached we are to results, the easier it is for us to be luckier, so that we can emit our thoughts with calmness, confidence, clarity, in order to really get pristine results.
Well, then it makes me think about, on the grander scale, if I want to become whole, if I want to have this relationship with the divine, and all I have to do is just think it and it will become, that wouldn't necessarily be correct either. I mean, I don't want to have, I don't want to put that kind of pressure on those results either, right?
Well, I don't know. I think what you said is 100% true. If you how we think is what we become. So if you can start by thinking, and really the beauty of becoming a whole person is that you're not senselessly optimistic or stupid. When we say use what you need to produce the feeling you're happy, that is very scientific. And that's the problem, is most of us aren't thinking right. We're not really using the stuff that's important to us that is associated with this feeling that I'm happy. We're actually searching for other things to produce the same feeling. Now, whether we realize it or not, that it's all going to be figured out or determined by what energy field we are attached to. That most of this is all physics, it's not magic, it's not something you believe in. That's where I found Kriya Yoga to be really helpful to me, because it took all the ambiguity out of the concept of God. Before I really started to practice spiritual science of Kriya Yoga, God to me was an astral image. It had very tangible characteristics. Now for me, God is the force right now supporting my life. It's this invisible, intangible resource. That's very different. So I'm not going to the astral plane any longer. I'm not drawing from a realm that's dualistic. And then, of course, the evidence procedure is, like, how do you know that God loves you? Well, it's giving you this very precious resource. Well, then how do you know you're getting this very precious resource? Well, because you're still alive. And that's where we use the breath to try and give tangibility to something that's invisible and intangible. And what's really interesting is that, just like we had said earlier, can manifest these very subtle psychological urges in so many different ways. That the same force, this innate drive that I want to be whole, can be driving me, to just stuff myself with potato chips, as opposed to indulge myself in this life force. And everything is going to be, I want to say, determined by whatever it is your body is longing for. And that's why it is so important to use and work with your physical body in the way that we do with, say, for example, the practices that we employ, so that we can get this change deep enough in our bodies so that we do feel connected. Because the rhetorical question we begin everything we do is, what would matter if your next breath wasn't there? If your next breath isn't there, you only have a couple of minutes to live. So the real question is, why am I not celebrating the availability of something that is this important to my existence? Why does the new car have all my attention?
Well, I mean, when you break it down like that, it does really sound like it's so simple, and yet we really make it so hard for ourselves to go through these processes. We really do think that it's more difficult than what it really is.
And part of it is because we're not taught correctly. We're not taught that we have to separate from our attachment to these energy fields, things that are visible and tangible, and connect to something that's invisible and intangible. Again, we think God is a person. So you're attaching to something that isn't going to give you the return that you're looking for anyway. So the magic doesn't happen. And the physics of spirituality doesn't start to manifest itself, this whole thing of apotheosis, becoming spiritual, expanding your identity beyond the limits of your body. These are the tangible results of this internal connection that you really want to be familiar with, and yet nobody's really teaching you to do that, and nobody's really giving you the evidence procedure that would accompany that. And especially something that there's really only one way that it works. Everything else was a sin. It missed the mark.
Wow, great content for our show. Thank you so much. And that's why we need leaders like you to guide us on the way. And thank you for all that information. But in closing, I would like to invite you listeners out there to visit our website. You can follow Swami on Pinterest and Twitter and Facebook too, of course. And also available to your listeners are the online classes you can access through the website, www.ipdtransform.com. Just click on the link for the online class and it will direct you to Powwow from there. But keep those comments, curiosities, and questions coming, because Swami does enjoy hearing from you. And be sure to tune in next week. I'm sure we'll have another great program, maybe try to give you guys some tools to get through the holiday season intact. Swami, any final thoughts for our listeners today?
Well, I would like to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. Try and indulge yourself in the forces that are really important to you, and maybe make the food less important if that's a possibility. Probably next week I was thinking maybe we could talk a little bit about maybe holiday stress. Is it a friend or a foe? And with that, I'll wish everybody a good day. Namaste, and I'll give it back to you.
And thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton, along with Swami Jayananda, signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.